Today's a really nice day for the website. Why? Because since December 2013, as of today, I have written and published 500 handheld game reviews across the PS Vita, well mostly the PS Vita, the Nintendo 3DS, the GPD Win handheld, and the Nintendo Switch. It took me a while to really think of what game I wanted to be my 500th review. I wanted it to be special, but I also wanted it to be kind of something that people haven't really looked at a whole lot. What I've picked was a new Sega game, the new Valkyria game, dubbed Valkyria Revolution, a spin-off or reboot of the Valkyria Chronicles games. It's been getting a lot of negative feedback both on the Vita version and the game in general because it deviates so far from the Valkyria Chronicles formula. So, here we go. My 500th review on the website. Here is my review of the PS Vita and PlayStation TV version of Valkyria Revolution. Revolution takes place in an alternate timeline of the country of Europa that we know from the Chronicles series. Instead of focusing on World War II, Revolution takes place in the era more in tune with all of the different European revolutions. An ore called Ragnite is discovered, just like in Chronicles, but instead of solely being fuel, it is infused into special melee weapons used by the military. Now the story itself revolves around a small group of militants dubbed the Anti-Valkyria Squad, as they lead their own country through a revolution, overthrowing the tyranny of a neighboring country. And all in all, it's just different. It's the first point here where I'm going to say, don't expect this game to be Valkyria Chronicles 4, because it's not. Imagine it as Valkyria New. Now the actual plot is really good. All of the dialogue goes through really nicely, all of the plot devices, especially the in the background plot that you see with a group of people that are actually manipulating the entire game and the entire war for their own personal gain. Gameplay-wise, Valkyria Revolution is an action RPG with some light strategy elements thrown into the mix. Picture Dynasty Warriors with more of an RPG focus, strategy RPG like ranged attacks, and a little bit of shooter involved. That's pretty much what this game is. Now, progression in the game is pretty simple. The story drives you forward, and each time you gain control, you'll be in a hub world, where you can explore a town, go to a factory to upgrade your weapons, go to your command center to do missions, or just wander around and talk to NPCs and start side stories with the different playable characters in your party. Now, whenever you're not in these places, you're on a mission. As I said, one of the areas is a command center, or just headquarters as the game likes to call it. Here you can take on story missions, battle missions, and free missions, and each mission has its own effect. Story missions advances the story. Free missions are basically just side missions you can do for grinding purposes. Battle missions affect the war. Every time you go to a mission screen, all of these little battle missions will pop up, and the game tells you if you don't do these, it'll affect the war. And it actually does. If you have a battle mission come up that says, please help us defend this outpost, and you don't help them, go to a story mission instead, you'll lose that territory, and the war will get worse for your side. Now, here comes one of the major problems in the game. So you're supposed to do these battle missions between each story mission. Okay, that's no problem. Do a battle mission, do a story mission, do a battle mission, do a story mission. Except, later on in the game, you have 3 battle missions between a story mission. And when you beat that second battle mission, 2 more pop up, which now turns it to 5. Then when you beat the last one, 2 more pop up, which brings it to 7. So 7 battle missions per story mission. And the bigger problem is when you have all of these different battle missions, they're not really very different. You fight the same mobs, the same enemies, in the same places. It's basically the same mission over and over and over and over again. It's basically grinding for levels, but not. Now eventually you're just gonna think, you know what? Screw this, I'm not gonna do these battle missions, I'm just gonna do the story missions. And eventually you're gonna hit a wall where you're underleveled. Even if you do easy mode, you'll easily get underleveled. And that creates one of the biggest problems of the game. You can't only do story missions because you're going to be underleveled. And doing these battle missions over and over is just going to feel like a repetitive grind. You can't only do one, you can't do one or the other. Do all your story missions, you're going to be underleveled, you're going to have to go back and do these battle missions anyways, completely ignoring the fact that it actually affects the war. Now let's talk about what you actually do in each mission. You spawn in a pretty large 3D battlefield, and you and your party just kind of wander through and fight through hordes of enemies, take over bases, fight through more hordes of enemies, until you reach your objective, whether it's taking a base, taking out a boss NPC, defusing bombs, but all of this is basically surrounded by taking over bases. Because I listed a few different objectives. You take over bases. It's pretty simple. You go fight off enemies until there aren't any enemies left, the base is yours. You go and defuse bombs, which are at bases. Can't defuse bombs until all the enemies are defeated, so you go and take over a base to defuse the bombs. Or you need a boss to appear. You go, take over bases to get the boss to appear. Does this sound like any other franchise to you? Further, attacks you can do. You have melee weapons to take out these hordes of enemies. You also have your skills. Elemental skills based off of what kind of elemental skills you have equipped. You have a firearm with limited ammo that fires off very similar to how you fired in Valkyria Chronicles. And then you got items and commands to the other party members. But all in all, fighting off hordes of enemies, taking over bases. It's basically Dynasty Warriors with a little Valkyria Chronicles twist thrown in. And that's when the repetition really starts to make sense. It's a Muso RPG in an alternate Valkyria timeline. Now, let's talk about length. You got 11 chapters to be cleared in the game, and how long they take really depends on your difficulty and how many of those battle missions you really have to do to be able to take on bosses. On easy mode, you can probably clear the game in about 30 hours. On normal mode, probably about 40 hours. So you're going to get a lot of game out of this. Now let's talk about the controls for a moment. When you're playing on the PlayStation TV, controls are wonderful. When you're playing on the Vita, controls are weird. Mostly for one specific control, the customization menu. On the PlayStation TV, you tap the select button and you bring up your menu where you can modify your character's gear. You can look to see what side stories are available right now in the hub world. You can look at player stats. On the Vita, you tap the middle of the touchscreen. The select button on the Vita doesn't do anything. It literally does nothing at all. Why can't the Vita use select for this instead of the touchscreen, which is just odd. Now, presentation. As far as graphics are concerned, the character models look pretty nice for a Vita game. Environments don't. If you recall Berserk and the Band of the Hawk, that game really downgraded details on the physical environments for smooth performance. Valkyria Revolution did the same thing on the Vita. The good thing is, this paid off. Across the entirety of the game, I only found 1 or 2 situations where the frames actually dropped, and it was in the middle of a battle animation, so it didn't really affect me at all. Now, in conclusion, Valkyria Revolution is a very new and very different take on the Valkyria universe. And it works well as long as you don't go into this game expecting it to be Valkyria Chronicles 4. Now, there are some problems. There's the repetitive mission system, the reduced graphics, and the really strange control scheme when you're playing on the Vita. Granted, it's not a bad RPG to dive into if you like the Valkyria series and don't mind seeing a what if Valkyria and Muso mashup, but just don't expect it to be Valkyria Chronicles 4 because it's really not. Reviews to Go rates Valkyria Revolution a 7 out of 10. If you'd like to discuss this further, feel free to comment below or head to the website at www.reviewstogo.com.